Hey, what's up, everyone? This is the Go Along Podcast. It's a special edition here. Friday night, recording with Jim Monis, Matt Fairburn. You heard that right, Matt Fairburn. Number one in your programs, number one in your hearts. No longer with us here in Western New York. It's kind of sad. It's so bittersweet doing this, Matt. We was just talking to Gina about how much we miss you and Christina. Could get the fams together. Do this at Hamburg Brewing Company if we really wanted to, but you're coming back soon. If I can remember correctly, you're going to be back in town soon.
A week from tomorrow, we'll be back in town, or we'll be hitting the road to come back in town for that Monday night football game, Pats Bills at in Orchard Park there, and then the Patriots are on bye week, so we'll actually be hanging around for a whole week in Western New York. And yeah, we miss it. We miss it like crazy. I love the new gig, but a lot of people that we miss in Western New York. It's we've got a lot of people here. This is originally home for me, but Western New York almost feels just as much like home, maybe even more so after the last 7 years.
How is it? I mean, really, we text all the time, but like, how is life out there? You know, sad stuff aside, is it not fun kind of living somewhere new and putting new roots down? And I'll get to the football later, but what's it been like for your fam?
Yeah, it's been crazy because for the first, month-ish of the season, I was going back and forth, making the drive for games and stuff. And probably around, even when I got here, the Patriots were on the road so much. So I've been traveling a bunch, and my wife was back and forth a little bit. So it's been a little helter-skelter on the life end of things, getting things settled. But I spent Thanksgiving with my parents for the first time in almost a decade yesterday. So,
Wow.
So stuff like that's cool. I've got some friends around, and the job is fun. It's a new challenge. It's a new, new market, and one I always kind of had as a pie in the sky goal to crack into. So it's been fun. It's a huge adjustment, as I'm sure you guys have both moved around for these jobs. It's a little crazy. It's a lot of moving parts, especially in the middle of a football season. But we've enjoyed it, and we've got the little guy at home to keep us grounded and keep us locked in. So we're only 6-7 hours down the road, so it's not too crazy, and we'll be back soon.
I cannot believe how big Nolan's getting. I mean, these pictures are blowing our minds. It's unbelievable.
He's packing on the pounds, man. He's really
him and
bringing
Sonny
it.
Are going to be like D tackles here before we know it. Just plug it up A gaps.
Yeah,
that's your style, Tyler. The run game.
That's right.
Exactly. They'll be a good fit for old school week at Go Along. They're real throwbacks.
Yes, we do. Oh, and look at that. That's a perfect segue, Matt. Thanks for teeing me up. We do. Next week, we're going to have a profile. Wyatt Teller, spend a little time with him down in Cleveland. Q&A with Amon Green. And I didn't tell Jim this, actually, so I'm going to tell you now. We're going to be doing an all old school team at Go Along. So I'm telling you now, Jim, get your favorite throwback, kick-ass, belligerent MFers written down.
Who would that be?
Send them in.
Is it all old school team for all time, or all old school team of current players?
Current players.
I like that.
Current players, yes. But a huge reason, the reason that we're all here talking, state of the AFC East. I think it's time. I wasn't sure when we had to strike with this podcast reunion, but the Bills and the Patriots are on a collision course of sorts for Monday Night Football at Highmark Stadium. Nobody knows both teams better than Matt Fairburn. The Bills, one could say, are a soft football team.
Some have said it.
You could say that. No, then they went into New Orleans. They blew them out. Yeah, I know that word is harsh, and
yeah,
obviously I'm talking more about the organizational philosophy, and because it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. I think we talked about it, Jim. It sure seemed like if you didn't have one of these improvisational quarterbacks, if you didn't have an offense that spread things out and a defense that was athletic, small, fast, like you're stuck in the Paleolithic age. So soft was a compliment, but I think now you're just seeing the counter from teams. Like you have to be able to bludgeon and run the ball and be physical. And Bill Belichick kind of zagged where everybody else zigged, paying all the money for everybody else. We'll get into it with Matt. But I guess first things first, like, what do you guys take away from Thursday night? Did you take away anything? I'm watching that game against the Saints. They're missing 14 starters. It was impressive that the Bills took care of business. I guess, Josh Allen looked really good in the second half, but that's not exactly what they're going to be seeing in the New England Patriots.
The one thing we know about the Bills games, it's either blowout or they're going to get blown out. I mean, it's crazy to think, like, we just haven't seen that. And you look back on the Chiefs game, because that's really the only team we keep saying that the Bills really beat. That's a legit contender. They're going to meet them again. We'll see how that plays out. But this, I don't know what to take anymore from the Bills. I've been high on them. I remain high on them because of their special teams and defense. I just think when you're that lights out, and we got to get into that too, Tyler. I want to know what's going on in that return game. That was a quick pull of the plug there after one.
I tell you what, when you fumble once on 131 touches, I mean, you can't have that.
That has scapegoat written all over it right there. That was strange to me. But anyway, I do love the Bills' special teams and their defense. I really do think and what happened against the Colts is just ridiculous. I mean, that can't happen. I mean, you cannot the Colts didn't have to throw the football. I just can't believe in this day and age where you can blow out a team and not throw the football. So I'm still confused on this Bills team. But I do believe in the quarterback, the defense, special teams.
Matt?
Yeah, they're still capable of getting right and getting hot and being the type of team that can rip off wins. And I think over the last few years, it becomes pretty apparent that matchups are everything, especially late in the season, catching teams at the right time, catching the right team too. There's that Colts team, that scheme that they run in the running game has caused problems for the Bills. You go back to 2018, Andrew Luck was still playing at that point, and they didn't even have to throw the ball to blow out the Bills. Derek Anderson was the quarterback. There was a whole host of other problems with that Bills team, but a lot of it was the scheme in the running game. Frank Reich really kind of had their number. So that they've been blown out in games under McDermott where they've gotten run all over before. So, but then they, last year in the playoffs against the Ravens, shut down that running attack, and they've done a pretty good job shutting down that running attack. So it's like almost scheme as much as it is physicality, point of attack stuff. So the matchups with the Bills are a little interesting, and it's why I'm really interested to see how they match up with this Patriots team, because there's some pluses and minuses for each team, I think.
Yeah. No, well said. I think that with Josh Allen too, it's so true. He could just get hot, and I mean that's why they paid him $258 million. Like, he has to be able to rise above the muck. I hear a lot of his offensive line's terrible. Well, he has no running game. Well, this is going wrong. That's going wrong. I mean, you paid him that to, rise above it all. And as we talked about way back when, Jim, like, is he making everybody else better? Is everybody else making him better? At this point, he has to make everybody else better, and he's done that a lot. I mean, he's looked really good. If he beats New England, if he beats Tampa Bay, he's probably the MVP front runner. So not all gloom and doom.
No, the sports. If you just follow like the sports books, which I tend to do a little bit, he is the front runner. He is the odds-on favorite to win MVP. I mean, I think I still believe Aaron Rodgers. It's still up in the air. Lamar Jackson, those guys have to be considered, but. Josh Allen's not missing games. He's not causing any issues. It's like he's the only one kind of that's playing every week. And now he's going against this defense, these defenses that they play coming up. Patriots defense is real. I want to get into that with Matt. Carolina's defense is real. Tampa's defense is not that good. I mean, it's really not. Their pass defense is not that good. So the Bills can feast on them. But this end of the year is going to be fascinating for the Bills.
It is. It's just at the same time, though. I mean, Jacksonville pushes you around. Miami is with you for a half.
Mm-hmm.
The Colts just obliterate you. I don't know if anybody's really thinking, oh, they got back on track against New Orleans.
No,
It didn't seem like that kind of a game.
No.
Matt, you were watching it as well, but like to you, is there a physicality problem for the Bills? And you covered Sean McDermott from day one. We have the man who recommended Sean McDermott be interviewed and push for him to be hired sitting here too. What we see on the field, I would think, in those games doesn't make him very happy. I don't think he wants to be known as a soft coach, but if they were to play the Colts in playoffs right now, they'd probably do the same thing to him.
Yeah, I think about soft in a few different ways because they clearly have an offensive line problem. I think that's pretty obvious. Deion Dawkins last night was not good at all.
It hasn't been good.
And the Saints pass rush has not been good this year. So they're mixing and matching on the offensive line. It's causing them some problems. They can't run the ball. Teams are begging them to do it basically, and they can't. And that's as much on the running backs as it is the offensive line. But to me, where soft or where whatever descriptor you want to use, I think mentally the psyche of this team is what I wonder about. And that's something that they can, maybe a mid-season lull like the one they're having can help them develop a little bit more mental fortitude to get them down the stretch. But it feels like I've watched probably 5 or 6 of their games. They've been on primetime a bunch, and there's been times where I've been able to catch them. It feels like they entered the season a little bit entitled, and I just feel like they're not leaning into any particular identity. They're easily knocked off their equilibrium, and they don't stick to one particular lane when it comes to offense. If you're going to be that type of team that throws the ball and is that way, then it needs to be a strength each and every week. You need to feed Stephon Diggs more than they have. You need to, I think, embrace who you are. You need to go for it on 4th down. You need to be that type of team. And like you said, Tyler, their head coach doesn't really match up, philosophy wise with some of their strengths. I think he would like to be that more physical team. And I think what I've found here in New England that's a little bit different is just how steady they are and how they were 2-4, and it was not, the sky is falling. It was not panic. They won 5 straight games, and you could almost barely tell the difference from when they were 2-4. And I think that's part of what has made them so good over the years. And it's something that this particular Bills team hasn't yet developed. I mean, you're talking about 20 plus years with Bill Belichick in New England, well-established culture and all those things. And it doesn't feel like the Bills have that yet. Maybe they could get there, but they get pretty high on some of their wins, and they can get a little bit off balance in some games and in some of their losses. And I think that starts a little bit with their coach, where the game's going a certain way and he stops getting aggressive on 4th down. And it definitely happens with their quarterback, where mistakes seem to pile up on him, and he seems to rush himself and try to do too much at times. So I think it's something they can still develop and they can still bottle up. But the initial part and your initial question of their physicality, that's just a personnel issue. Like, they don't have a good offensive line. And so you're not going to flip the switch and become a team that can run the ball overnight, because they just don't have the personnel to do it. I think they're good enough on defense, probably physical enough on defense, but it's not there consistently up front on offense.
I want to get your take on this too, Jim. Like it seems top down to me, like organizational, where I mean, you're right, Matt. Like the personnel's not there. I don't think you can all of a sudden just ask this offensive line to physically maul opponents. But whether it's the way Sean's calling a game, but even the decisions made on draft day, I don't know. It's probably a combination of things. But this team, when it was really bad there against Jacksonville and Indy, I just kept thinking of our old high school football coach. He was an assistant coach. He actually coached my dad. He was his head coach at Salamanca, and we had him at Ellicottville. And I still remember him. He said, "You don't want to be front runners. You don't want to be front runners. You know, when the getting's good and everything's good, you know, like we'd play a team like they're front runners. They'll kill you if things are going good, but if you punch them in the mouth, they don't know how to respond." And it's one of those things that sounds very nebulous and vague, but it is true. I mean, you watch the Bills. For better or worse, that's what they've been. Like last season at this point, they're just killing teams. New England, San Francisco, they're blowing them out. I mean, as soon as they'd get a lead in the third quarter, it was kind of like the feeling I'd get watching the Packers in 2011 when they're 15-1. Like as soon as they got past you, I mean, see ya. But once that Packers team got punched in the jaw by the Giants in the playoff game, they had no response. The Bills are kind of that way right now. So they could get hot. They could run away from teams, but if they run into another team that isn't going to retreat to the corner, I don't know how they fare. And to me, more so than the actual players, the talent, the roster, the personnel, I think that's an indictment on coaching. And even bigger than that, the type of player you're bringing in, but just that overall attitude, they talk about process so much, all these things. That's what that should be.
Well, McDermott, when we met with him, it's pass rush and secondary. I mean, the stopping the run thing is going to be part of it, but he doesn't want to give up big plays. And that goes back to even Philly when we were there with Jim Johnson. I mean, it wasn't about toughness necessarily. And you don't ever want to get run all over like that. That can't happen. But I think some of these coaches feel like they'll be able to stop that run enough. But I think the key is that they feel like offensively, the other team's going to have to throw to keep up with you. That's what you want to hope for with Josh Allen. Like you said, Todd, we're going to get up on teams now. Come catch us, and they can't run the ball. And then you have your pass rush and secondary in place. I mean, their linebackers. Let's face it. I mean, we drafted Milano. I mean, he's not a run stopper. Edmonds is side to side. We know that. We've seen him struggle with tackles his whole career. I mean, he gets a lot of credit for being a really good player. I still think he's okay. I don't really notice him as a difference maker. I mean, obviously he didn't play against the Colts, so they're going to say that they needed him, but he's not a great run stopper. That's not really his thing. And their defensive line, these defensive ends they have are all up the field rushers. Now we're going to see what's going to happen without Trey White. I mean, now you want to talk about a major loss. Trey White is playing about as good as any corner you'll watch in football. And this is going to be really interesting to see how they adjust to this. So I guess my point is McDermott certainly wants to bring toughness and stop the run. Every coach does, but that's not how they've been building their team. If you pay attention to their drafts and free agent signings.
I keep thinking about that Chiefs game, the first Chiefs game last year, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you covered it, Matt. I remember it was kind of like, we're going to sit back in this bracketed type of coverage, and they just ran Clyde Edwards-Helaire all over the field, and Mahomes still was like 22 at 26 or 27, something like that. So
Yeah,
I
that
don't
was
know.
a
Yeah, you're right. The
problem
way
in
they
that
coach,
game where they let him run the ball, and then couldn't stop him in the passing game. So it was like, that's where I kind of say it's, and I don't know the best way to put it, but it's just like, if you're committing to something, right, and owning who you are and being really good at it, because Jim mentions all these guys they drafted up front, and not that many of them are that good. Ed Oliver's been really coming on lately. He played well last night, but I think he can still run hot and cold, at least in the games I've seen this year. And
Watch a Colts game.
Yeah. And a lot of these other guys, I mean, still young, but you don't see, Greg Rousseau, hot and cold, AJ Epinesa, Boogie Basham. These are high draft picks. These are premium choices that they spent. on these players. Mario Addison is a guy they paid a lot of money. They've invested in that defensive line. That was a point I made a lot last year, was that between draft picks and money, they had so much tied into that defensive line and just didn't get the results. And so I do think there's an element of they are very good at limiting big plays. The secondary, one of the best in football. And as Jim pointed out, Trey White, that's probably the biggest takeaway from the game last night, losing one of their best players. But yeah, I think, finding yourself is part of an NFL season, right? Figuring out what you have. Bill Belichick says that all the time. September and October are about figuring it out and seeing what type of team you have. And the famous saying around here that everybody's been repeating is, football season starts after Thanksgiving. And you have to know who you are and be good at that. And I think the Bills, I think they're getting there. That they've had games, but some of these adversity moments should teach them a little bit as they go forward, and how they respond will probably say more about their coach and their players than anything that happened in those games, if that makes sense. So it's not like, discard this team that's one of the most talented in the league, but they have had some moments that make you wonder.
Well, I mean, the next step had to be the Super Bowl. The next step is getting out of the In the Hunt graphic and getting there, winning it.
No doubt.
This is their window.
Get out of the In the Hunt graphic.
This is their window, right? You mentioned the money they paid Josh Allen, regardless of whether you think he's that guy that elevates people, I think, more often than not. But he's going to have to elevate lesser people when they don't have as much money to spend, because he's eaten up a lot of it. And that's where the offensive line, personnel wise, not great right now. However, I look at that second interception last night where a lot of people brushed it off and said, that's not Josh's fault. That's the offensive line. He held the ball for a while. Agreed. It was north of 3 seconds. And, the reason he got hit was because he held the ball. I think a lot of times, and it happened early in the year in New England as well with Mac Jones, it's very easy for people to blame the offensive line. And sometimes there's stuff a quarterback can do before the snap to identify what's happening, post snap, identify what's coming, and get rid of the ball. And I think that's been a problem for Josh Allen. And, I think that's part of elevating your team too. That's part of, okay, the offensive line isn't great. Let's, figure out how to cover that up with good quarterback play. Something Tom Brady did forever. It's what the best ones do. And it's probably the next step for Josh. You have to constantly be evolving and growing as a quarterback in the NFL. It's why, sometimes these careers that seem like they're taking off hit a brick wall. You have to constantly have answers for what people are throwing at you.
It's funny. He almost plays extremely cocky in the pocket. I mean, he is almost flat-footed and just stands there sometimes. And it's he's not scared at all. We all know how tough the guy is. Really tough, and he loves football, and he seems to make the right reads. But I think he's a little bit lackadaisical in the pocket, where he does it's almost like he's just standing there and not aware of what's about to happen. Like he can break any tackle, extend the play, and that's when he gets in trouble. He still comes up with these interceptions or fumbles. I think they're still there. I don't think he shook all that yet. And I'm a huge Allen believer. I really am. He's won me over. I do think he's elevating this team. But I love what you said, Matt, about football starts now, and it's true. And I think for the Bills, it's officially time to really pay attention with this string of teams that they're playing.
Right. And I love that. It's kind of that arrogant approach to the position that you want.
Do you believe?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Do you see that at all? Or am I just like?
No, you're right. He throws into that's how he looks at coverage too. I think where he's not going to be anticipatory. He's not really throwing guys open because he knows I've got a gun of an arm. I'll just get it there. Yeah. I'll wait till he's open and then I'll get it there. Which I think last year he faced the most man-to-man coverage than any quarterback in the league, like 37% of the time around there. And this year, teams are figuring it out. Okay, let's sit back and zone,
Make 'em
force him to
something.
throw into some windows, take away the big play. And it's been tougher. Like, he's still been really good. Like we've
Oh,
said
yeah,
here,
no doubt.
he's
Yeah.
still talented enough to figure it out and has a strong enough
His
arm to figure it
numbers
out.
are
But
almost the same, actually.
Yeah,
It's kind
he's
of
playing
weird.
really well. No,
His
he's playing
numbers
really well.
are really close to the same, but I think like his team, there's been the difference between this year and last year from afar. You know, I'm not as close to it as I was last year, but there's more of those lulls, whether it's in a game or a stretch of games where, you know, you blow a team out and throw 4 touchdowns, you know, it's going to look the same and then you throw none the next week. It's going to look the same as throwing 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
So I think there's just been a little bit more inconsistency, but you know, the schedule hasn't been great either. It really, I think the thing with this Bills team that's different than last year is that last year it was all about, there was a lot of stuff that they needed to, a lot of demons they needed to exercise. You know, they rip off a season like that, one of their best regular seasons of all time. They win the division. They leave no doubt. This year, I don't think people care about anything that happens before January. It's
We
like
said
get
that.
to the playoffs and make something happen. You could throw 20 interceptions,
Mhm.
but if you lock in and go on a run, nobody's going to care. And that's where we're going to find out, can this Bills team flip the switch? Because it really doesn't matter if you hit a lull in the middle of the season. Ask the Buccaneers. You know, they took a while to get it figured out last year. What matters is, can you find that gear in the playoffs? And who knows? Maybe they'll be better off for all this stuff that's happening right now. Maybe Josh Allen will be better off and they'll be tested once they get there.
I was watching the Packers Viking game from last weekend was phenomenal. Like, it was such high end quarterback play back and forth. Both of them was just, it was unbelievable. And I want to see that. Like, you're like, what are they going to like? I want to see Josh have a shootout with somebody and keep equaling that, you know, coming back and going right down the field and scoring. The other team answers, Josh answers. That's to your point, Matt, a little bit, is when they're going to get punched in the mouth again, how are they going to respond?
And people might be thinking that we're being too critical of a team
No.
that's what 7-4, but like,
No,
who cares about wins against Miami and New York
no,
and
yeah, we're talking about this.
Washington,
You said it. We're talking
like,
about the
and the
Super Bowl.
zombie Saints, right? Like,
Yeah.
you should want this conversation if you're a Bills fan. Like,
Yes.
are you trying to talk yourself into Trent Edwards still and JP Lossman? Like, great, like, try to talk your way and rationalize that kind of stuff, but like, it's about time
Yeah.
you had a team that expected to win. So yeah, and to Matt's point, the window isn't open for
No,
very long. It's
we
going to
know
get
that.
very, very difficult for the front office very, very
5
soon.
years.
So,
Yeah. Once you pay your quarterback like that, it's like you're on the clock. You're about a 4 or 5 year window to get this done.
Yeah, I mean, the window could be open for a really long time, right? That's the challenge, is how long can you keep it open? But the window, the best window is when you've got the cheap quarterback. And they don't have that too much longer, but you can extend the window. But I think what the window that's closing on them a little bit is, you know, Bills fans had a heck of a time last year with the Patriots going 7-9 and, you know, dancing on the grave, as they should have after 20 something years. You know, it probably felt good to have one like that. And I think the Bills maybe didn't think this, but the fans certainly thought New England would stay down for longer. And I don't know if New England's not back to what they were, but they're back in the conversation. They're back in the mix and they're back being a pain. And I know the Bills in the front office and, you know, the coaching staff knew they would be. You know, they didn't, you know, sit there and think, you know, this was going to be, you know, easy, you know, walk into the division title. But that's the window that sort of shrunk on them a little bit, was like, oh, geez, the Patriots, there they are again. And they're fighting for a division here. But when you have a quarterback, you should be able to be in contention every single year. And that's where I think the Bills are. And that's why I think, yeah, critical, whatever you want to say. But
It's
but that's the standard that you're poking holes in a championship team. Jim probably, similar conversations Philly media was having all those years you guys were there, right? With
All this
McNabb.
Philly, New Orleans, everything you're saying, the regular season was long because you just wanted it over with. You couldn't wait for like when I was in New Orleans, we just get to the playoffs. Let's go.
Yeah.
And now, and that's what the Bills pay attention to the teams that health is going to be critical for these teams down the stretch. The healthy teams getting into the playoffs make a run. That's just how it works. So let's see who, pay close attention to health. Josh Allen is not the issue. I mean, I hope we're not coming across that way. He's the reason why we're talking about a window and that this is going to be a realistic run every year as long as they have him. But these safeties aren't going to get any younger. I mean, Hyde's been, I mean, at some point, like you said, this window they're part of that window too. Those safeties play at a high level for that defense. So, I mean, it's a lot to pay attention to. And losing Trey White is that for when we talk about health, that is a major loss in that secondary. I don't think those other players, I don't think you realize how much he helps that secondary.
And we do have Matt here because
yes,
we got to get to those Patriots.
Let's do it. I got some questions.
We got to pause for station identification though, real quick. We're brought to you by Hamburg Brewing Company. I don't see any HBC in your hand there, Jim.
Well, I like to keep hidden when I'm drinking right now. HBC is, I told you, I like my Louis in the morning, lunchtime. We're switching to a little bit stronger. We're getting ready for a nightcap now, a little nightcap.
Okay. You're right. Louis is a little, at this point, doesn't really hit you that hard.
It's a breakfast beer.
Matt, we got to get Matt on down there for the hopping stance to really amp this. Yes.
I'm working
Matt,
a little hopping stance right now.
This hopping stance right now, that'll get me telling the Tyrod Trevor Siemian stories real quick.
Well, we're gonna get to that for sure.
We'll get to that later. Yeah.
Yes, we could have dedicated a whole hour to Trevor Siemian, really, if we wanted to spike those ratings.
I gotta get that out of my head from last night. That was hard to watch.
But everything we're talking about here, like the way the Bills play, right? Like with even Sean McDermott, the way he wants to play schematically, and the way they're built with, let's say, less than ideal physicality, and the way Bill Belichick can just make elite quarterbacks look like Trevor Siemian. This all seems to play right into New England's hands. I mean, we've talked about it, Matt, but there's probably a good chance Bill Belichick just carved out time in the offseason for Josh Allen. And he's going to be pounding away with whoever's at running back. And he spent all that money on all these tough football players on both sides of the ball. He's got a legit pass rusher. He's got a legit shutdown corner. I would think New England's ready to win the division now, compete for a Super Bowl now. Do you think that this kind of plays into their hands?
Yeah, it's crazy. They were sitting at 2-4, got shredded by Dak Prescott. They had that game against Houston that they won that looked like it might get away from them a little bit. It was looking like, a little bit dicey there for a little while. But they flipped a switch when they were at 2-4 and pulled their way out of it. And now you're right. These matchups with the Bills, you knew they were coming later in the season when Belichick teams tend to get better as the year goes along, and every team tries to do that, but it happens quite a bit here in New England. Didn't happen last year, but this team certainly is. And I distinctly remember the look on Belichick's face when he had the handshake with McDermott after that blowout last year. And he always looks he has varying degrees of disgust on his face seemingly at all times, but that was pretty striking. They got beat badly in that game. And it was the first time really that Josh Allen had a good game against the Patriots. And so, yeah, how much time did he carve out? I'm sure some, right? Like how could you not? He's the guy in your division that you need to beat. And he's not unlike Patrick Mahomes in a lot of ways. That style of quarterback is sort of what you're up against. Justin Herbert, another one who looked human out in LA to sort of get this winning streak rolling for the Patriots. So this team, the matchup with the Bills, I find really interesting because secondary wise, there might be something for the Bills to exploit a little bit. They're not super deep at corner. Jalen Mills is in that spot. Stephon Gilmore used to occupy. They've got Miles Bryant in the slot because Jonathan Jones went down for the year. JC Jackson is a stud, but Stephon Diggs handed him one last year. So
He did. Yeah, it's true.
So what's the real interesting shift from the Patriots? They were one of the teams that played more man coverage than everybody the last few years. And when that 5-game winning streak started, they're now playing as much zone coverage as almost any team in football. So this is sort of the Bill Belichick thing, right? You take the first couple of months, you figure out what you're good at, figure out what you have, and then his willingness to adapt and lean into his personnel and the situation at hand and not say, I want to be this, I have to be this. It's helped this defense immensely. I mean, they haven't allowed a point in 19 possessions. In 2021, the time of offensive football, they've allowed 13 points in their last 3 games. They played the Browns, the Panthers, and the Falcons are pretty lousy, but like in the NFL in 2021, 13 points in 3 games. I don't care who you're playing. So
no, and Matt Ryan's he's played well this year,
they've put up points. They've put up points against other teams. They were without Patterson, they were without Ridley, but I mean, they're playing at home on Thursday Night Football. The Patriots go on the road, and this defense is nasty. And Matt Judon put it best after their game against the Falcons when he said, they want to be a-holes on the field. That is exactly what they are. They are mean and they are nasty. Matthew Judon, whenever the Bills played the Ravens over the years, I always marveled at Judon because he just seemed like the biggest pain in the ass to play against. It just seemed like it physically probably hurt to play 4 games or 4 quarters against Matthew Judon. Like, he just brings it. And he's already got a career high in sacks. They've played 11 games. They've got guys all along the defensive line that most people, haven't heard of. They're not household names, but they can, stop the run. Donta Hightower and Jawan Bentley are 2 really good linebackers. They've got 3 safeties that can all play. And the end product is a defense that is going to be a nightmare for most teams to match up with. Now they have bigger tests, Titans, Bills twice, they play Colts, but man, this is as good a defense as there is in football right now, and it's carrying them for sure.
I mean, Matt, they're third. Yeah, they're 3rd in yards per play on defense. They are 5th in yards per pass attempt. Those are major stats that I always look at. This defense is locked down. Like, they are officially, that's why, I mean, Tyler and I did our, a little mid-year prediction things. They have the formula right now. And this has nothing to do, we'll get into Mac Jones whenever. This defense this is such a credit to Belichick and how great of a coach he is to, in 1 year, get this thing right on defense. And that, because he knows if you have a defense playing like this, you are going to be in every single game, and a quarterback who won't turn the ball over, you can win any game.
Dak Prescott got him good. That game seemed like
that Cowboys offense is loaded.
That seemed like the game that kind of woke them up a little bit. They mentioned, I mentioned the shift in coverage, the way they started playing, and I think they made some other adjustments, but you look at it, they trade Stephon Gilmore mid-season, they lose Jonathan Jones, and they just keep getting better. And
how
it's the coach, and that's where, they have great personnel too, right? Like,
they know who they want.
Yeah, Belichick always, says, he's like, I'm not out there tackling anybody and covering anybody. Nobody wants to see that. But, the fact that, they can identify who fits, put them in a position. And I think too, they are a really good game plan team. They're really good at taking away what a team does best. They're really good at, adjusting what they do, keeping people guessing. I think, the most impressive games they've had in this 5-game stretch are the Chargers and the Browns. And the Chargers one looked closer than it was because of a late touchdown from the Chargers, but that was a bad game from Herbert, who's having a great year. And Mayfield and the Browns offense looked awful a few weeks ago in Foxborough.
Awful.
So defense is hard to rely on in 2021, but this one is really good. And the Bills are right there with them. You talk about all those stats, the Bills are neck and neck, but
that's why I'm saying those are the two I'm with you. When you have that, you're in every game.
But it's a different defense
Style.
in New England because they play totally different. And I think they've got the better coach. I think you're not going to have as many games as you saw the Bills have against Indy, which felt like as much coaching as it did. I mean, geez, I don't know how you're not ready for that rushing attack, as unprepared as they looked, physically. And I just don't see that happening as often here to the Patriots. But like I said, the tests get tougher, and we'll see. That Monday Night Football game is going to be really interesting. It's fascinating to me that the Bills and Patriots play one another twice in the final month of the season and conceivably could catch each other in the playoffs, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a real cat and mouse game there of what are you showing each other scheme wise, and trying to figure out what you're doing when you're going to see teams that much. It's interesting. It's going to be a fun final 6 weeks here.
I really thought Tom Brady paid Bill Belichick the best compliment that he ever could get. I mean, that game was just so entertaining to watch because, I mean, he just had Tom Brady seeing things and not seeing things. And it was about as bad as you'll see Tom Brady play because of what Belichick and Steve Belichick, and all the facial expressions he was giving us that night were doing. But, I mean, Matt, as you remember, it was the field goal drive that put Tampa Bay ahead at the end. I think Jonathan Jones got hurt it was second down. He gets hurt, comes out for one play. Justin Bethel comes in on a 3rd and 6, and Brady knows to go right to where Jonathan Jones was playing. What a compliment to Belichick. I don't know what the hell I'm seeing out here. I don't know what I'm doing. You win, Bill. All right, you win this night. Oh, you're one starter who knows exactly where to be, exactly when he needs to be there. He's out for one play. I'm going to go right to his replacement. And that first down led to the game-winning field goal, essentially. So, man, it's. I hate cliches. We really hate cliches on this podcast, whether it's do your job or trust the process. Get the hell out of here with that. Sometimes there is something to it. Sometimes there is something to culture. But talk about doing your job. Everybody just kind of seems to know what they have to do with Bill Belichick right now, and that's a scary thing. I thought it was funny, Jim. We both spit out stats at the same time. We did not plan that. And they were you're talking about how down in and down out, how good they are basically with that. And then I'm talking about turnovers and taking the ball away.
I heard you say that. Yeah.
We didn't plan that. How good their defense is right now.
Yeah, it really is. It's Jack Del Rio had Brady seeing ghosts too. A couple weeks ago in Washington.
A legend in his own right, Jack Del Rio.
Unbelievable. But anyway, I can't. These Bills, and you're right, Matt. What's really funny is they're going to play twice so quickly, and realistically, they're going to play again. I mean, that 3 times is real. Yeah, it would be. I really think it would be. I want to see it. I want to see Belichick, Josh Allen handle Belichick. I want to see how it works. Because he did.
I think it could be a great rivalry.
Agreed.
For the first time.
Yes, it's flipped.
Ever, maybe, I don't know. It was never a rivalry before, and now it has a chance to be because you have competing styles, right? I mean, you've got 2 totally different quarterbacks. It's just kind of it's interesting. You bring up that Bucks game, and that Bucks game really felt like a pivotal moment for this team, even though the winning streak started a little later. After that game, you got the sense that those guys all thought, they came away from that game thinking we should have won. That they came away thinking that showed them that they were a team that could hang with the Super Bowl champs. And they really from that point forward, we're hanging in games, and then, everything kind of snowballed and that they're on this winning streak. But they were maybe a foot away on that Nick Folk field goal from winning that game, and they knew it. And I think, between that and then, a blown long third down against the Cowboys that cost them that game, they felt like they were 2 plays away from having a totally, people would have been talking about the Patriots months earlier than they were, and the results started to show up. So, that Buccaneer was a big moment for them, and one of their best defensive performances, really, to shut Brady down that way. And it showed them that they had the formula to do it. And now it's time to see how they do, when football season starts. As they say, they've got the first place Titans on Sunday, and then they've got Monday Night Football against the Bills. They've got a bye week and another primetime game against the Colts. And then maybe, who knows, maybe they get flexed into primetime the following week when the Bills come to Foxborough. So it's about to be big game after big game after big game. And they went all this way. They haven't had their bye week yet. They've really had to slog through and figure it out on the fly. I think that's probably been the most impressive thing, is this 10-day break they just had after Thursday Night Football is the longest they've been on.
Totally agree with you on that Tampa Bay game too, Matt. And remember writing it at the time it go along. I mean, that was the takeaway here. I mean, Belichick still has his fastball. Like they lost the game, but it felt like they were winning a step closer toward winning the war. Like he can still call a game against any team, any offense, any quarterback.
Yeah, it felt like they, it was a weird, obviously that week was, mayhem, right? Brady, Belichick, and all the hype and everything else. And it felt like when the dust settled, it was like they both kind of won in some way, right? Like Brady, there's a classic Brady game of like do enough, escape with a win. What he did for New England so many damn times over the last 20 years. But to your point, Tyler, it also, Bill Belichick walked away, like Brady walked out of that building exhausted, frustrated, and just feeling pretty fortunate to have won a game. And I think Belichick took something out of that. I think he probably took some satisfaction there. And they both got a little bit of, a little bit of what they needed there. Brady got the win. And Belichick showed everybody that he can still, game plan and scheme with the best of them. And what a fascinating chess match. You talk all the time about like, oh, this player used to coach, or this player used to play for that coach, or this player used to play for that team. He must be so familiar, whatever. That was like on a completely different level. Like, has there ever been a coach player combo more familiar with one another than those two? Like, could Belichick throw anything at him that he hasn't seen? Can Brady, do anything that Belichick hasn't seen? I mean, they're probably both twisting themselves in knots, with trying to figure out what each other's going to do. So it was really interesting. But yeah, definitely showed Belichick's fastball was, still hitting that peak velocity.
The only one that came to mind this year was when David Culley returned to Buffalo to face his old. He knew everything Josh Allen. He knew Josh Allen inside and out. That was, hey Matt. Here's the question. Sorry, Matt. Here's the question. We talk about, obviously we talk about quarterbacks a lot, and the biggest thing for me with any quarterback, especially a young guy, is when the other players buy into that quarterback. When they all officially say, hey, we got the right guy. And that's when you see them playing for him. Have you noticed that? Did the Patriots love Mac Jones? Is that something you can see?
It only took us 48 minutes to get to Mac Jones.
So that's actually pretty good for us.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, yeah.
Yeah, Mac Jones, he's the hot topic around here these days.
But does the defense, like, do you see other players just, is he the guy? Like, do they say, hey, we're going to do whatever. We know Mac is our guy.
I think so. I mean, you can't attach these guys to lie detectors and all that, but
right.
Really to a man, they say the same thing about the guy all the time. And I think a lot of that comes from, in other places, I've only ever covered one other team, so I'll just compare it to Buffalo.
Sure.
And I think sometimes in a place like Buffalo, it takes more time to earn that because, for instance, EJ Manuel, right? He had to really win people over because I think a lot of players in that locker room and in that organization probably thought that Marone and Whaley still had to win them over, right? They didn't know exactly what they had at the top. Same with Rex Ryan and Tyrod Taylor, and to an extent, Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane with Josh Allen. I think the difference with that was, they bought into Sean, and then they took a quarterback in the top 10, and people were ready to buy in pretty quickly. Yeah. And here, I think there's such an overwhelming trust and belief in Bill Belichick that, and Josh McDaniels as well, that when they identify and pick a guy and plug him in to start, people are ready to fall in line. And I think Mac Jones has earned more on top of that, more of that trust and belief because of the type of guy he is, because it's just not an accident, right? That Bill Belichick didn't pick a non-Bill Belichick quarterback and throw him in there. He didn't pick he picked a guy that he knew would be able to win over the room because he's steady. He is so frustrating up at the podium during interviews because he is so he's Bill Belichick in quarterback form. He is not, breaking script whatsoever. He is that guy that, these guys all believe in, and they love him, and they know he's young and he's still growing, but yeah, they love how steady he is. They love, how confident and how in control he is in the pocket, and how smart he is, how competitive he is. He threw an interception against the Falcons and then went and threw his body on the line and tackled AJ Terrell as he was coming down the field. Little things like that have really helped him win the team over. He's pretty advanced, I think, for a rookie quarterback. The bigger question is probably what will he be in 3 years? But I think the way he processes the game, the way he avoids mistakes, the way he responds to the mistakes that he does make, all those things have these guys really buying into who he is and what he can bring to their team. He's had some good moments this year for sure.
It's almost like we sit there and watch him every week, and it's like I don't ever come away watching their game thinking, wow, he is incredible. It's just, you said a perfect word, he's steady. And I almost think he has, on a talent level, almost like a Kirk Cousins, where he's just really he's a good quarterback. But the difference is Kirk doesn't have that steady mental toughness with where Kirk falls apart in big games. I don't think Mac Jones will do that. And we'll find out. I mean, it's his rookie year. He can't be too hard, but he could not have gone to a better franchise. And Tyler and I talk about being ready for a rookie quarterback. I mean, you look at these other guys like Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence and Fields, what they're dealing with, just nightmare situations for a rookie, really. And Mac's in an unbelievable position with qualified. I mean, it's hard to find qualified guys to bring, like you said, McDaniels and Belichick, aren't many of them.
It's interesting, Jim. I'd love to pick your brain on this because what you said describes what I feel watching this guy throw in and throw out. I got here, and each game I walk away thinking, he didn't blow me away.
He didn't do anything. I know.
Right? But and a lot of the throw, so quarterback play is so much different than anything else in sports, I think, because
agreed.
We talk about this term upside all the time, right? And that's the big debate with Mac Jones. Right. I think even here in Boston is on the radio is what's this guy's upside, right? And I think when you think upside, you think strong arm, you think athlete, and you think of a guy like Josh Allen, 6'5", huge arm, can run around, upside forever. But I think some of the subtleties of playing quarterback are also baked into upside. What's between your ears is baked into upside, because when you think about some of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, three that come to mind in the last, since 2000, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, and Peyton Manning, they don't fit your classic upside profile, right? That they didn't have the strongest arms in the league, but it was everything else that they did. And I'm not comparing Mac Jones to those guys, but
No, it's yeah.
early career Tom Brady, the Patriots won in a very similar way with early career Tom Brady. Mac Jones makes the right decisions. He makes quick decisions, and he takes easy throws when they're there. He's not dealing with a great cast of weapons around him. He has a really good offensive line that took some time to come together.
Yeah,
Hunter Henry's been good.
Yep.
Nelson Aguilar hasn't returned on investment quite yet. Kendrick Bourne, pretty good player, makes plays after the catch.
I liked him. He's tough. I like his whole. I agree. I like him.
He's got great energy. He's another great signing. Jonnu Smith has been kind of a non-factor so far. Jacoby Myers, steady guy, but not. He's not a superstar.
Mm-mm.
It's just they kind of just little by little chip away at you, and all of a sudden you're sitting there like, wait a second, it's 45-7 against the Browns. Like, how the hell did this? And like they put up 50 against the Jets, and it's like, they can run the ball really well, obviously. And Mac Jones is throwing a ton of screens.
That was the game. I got done watching the Jets game, and I said the same thing to my friend Mark Ross at NFL Network. I said, they just scored 50 points, and I swear I don't know if Mac Jones did anything. Like, I don't even know what he did.
Yeah, it's just, and that's fine, right? Like that's like,
yeah.
I think that's what's interesting is like, if it's working and they're winning games.
Oh yeah.
Does it really matter if he's, lighting up the fantasy scoreboard or throwing, 5 touchdowns, whatever it is? It's like, the question though, like you said about the team as a whole, I think is, when the going gets tough, when they're down a couple of scores, can they throw when the other team knows that they have to throw? I think when the Bills and Patriots match up, that secondary is going to give them some problems. And that's where, the defense comes into play, because they're not down 2 scores all that often, because the defense doesn't let it happen. And the play that I come back to in my mind a lot with Mac Jones is after he threw the pick 6 against the Cowboys. Yeah. It looked like it was going to cost him the game. He came back the next play and threw a 75-yard touchdown to Kendrick Bourne, ripped it right down the field. Yeah. And kind of one of those plays that made you realize, like, okay, when something goes really bad for this guy, when it's a tough moment in a tough game against a tough team, he can do it. Just haven't seen a lot of those yet because he's young in his career and the defense is just whooping everybody's ass so that he doesn't have to.
Boy, Matt, like, I thought you were putting it so perfect too on the idea of upside. I'm like, I think I've heard that point before, and it took me a second, and it was exactly what Kurt Warner was talking about with Josh Allen. I'm like, okay, look, you see the big arm, you see the physical ability, but yeah, that's how we all think up. That's what we all think upside is and ceiling is. That was the word he used. But to him, that ceiling is exactly what you're talking about. It's like between the ears and like your mind. How are you processing the game? Are you processing it in that split second to know exactly where you have to go with the football, exactly when you need to? Mac Jones at this stage, I mean, that's probably what we underestimated. I know I did. I mean, we were ripping him on this podcast, thinking like, look, if you're a team and you're going to take a quarterback in the first round, gamble on that physical ability. Find something extraordinary and work with that. Maybe that's something that's extraordinary can be your brain, right? I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe that ability that he has is better than Zach Wilson's improvisation or Trey Lance's running ability or Trevor Lawrence's whatever. So
true.
Situation matters. I'm not saying it doesn't. I mean, clearly, like, if these guys are in New England, maybe they're doing the same thing, but there's just no debate right now. I mean, Mac Jones has the best shot at a long-term NFL career here.
The better flip would be put Mac Jones on the Bears, or I don't know what that would look like. Like, I can't imagine what that would look like. I just don't think we'd be sitting here talking about Mac Jones much. But that's the hard part drafting these guys is yes, Zach Wilson in any workout is you're going to draft him over Mac Jones. But the biggest thing I keep saying, right, Tyler, every week is the game is too fast for Zach Wilson. He doesn't appear close to being ready to play in the NFL. Here comes Mac Jones. Like, yeah, I can't do
In
all
the
that.
same division. I mean,
Same division. And
how did
it's like
the league let this happen?
right. It's like I've been playing for the Patriots in college. Like I'm ready for this.
It's
Save it in
bizarre.
Belichick. There's something
It's-
going on here, right?
It's like I can't even, it feels too early to play the game of like, oh my God, what did all these teams do with Mac Jones, right? It feels a little early, like that everybody else screwed it up because,
That's what I'm saying.
fit matters.
It
It
matters.
does. And I'm not saying that Mac Jones would be lousy everywhere else, but
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that every other quarterback would be as good in New England either.
No,
I think
I agree
that's
with you.
I
I
think
agree with
that's important to note. Like, would Mac Jones have the Jaguars going to the playoffs? No. Would he have the Jets in playoff position? Probably not. But Zach Wilson, I don't think would have the Patriots where they are right now.
I agree with that.
I don't know that maybe Justin Fields would. I don't know.
Fields would be the guy that would intrigue me. I think he was
Yeah.
ready. I feel like he could play. Belichick would love Fields.
Yeah, I think, getting into a spot where you have Bill Belichick, who's underrated as like an offensive mind as well. Like Josh McDaniels pushes the buttons and, calls the plays and deserves a ton of credit for what they do. He's the mastermind on offense. But Bill Belichick has always had that total team coach approach. And, his defensive acumen certainly pays off for the offense. He has those meetings on Tuesdays with the quarterbacks, and certainly that's a huge asset that not all the other rookies have. But it just shows that it goes back to a ton of stuff I wrote. When the Bills picked Josh Allen, and all these questions that we may never have answers to, right? Like, when do you play a rookie quarterback, or how do you know when you have the guy, or how do you build around one? Like, there are right and wrong answers, but there's also a lot of gray area in everything. There's no two situations are alike. No two quarterbacks are alike. And it's like we talk about with Mac Jones. He's not going to necessarily blow you away, but like, he makes a decision to throw a certain route really quickly that doesn't look like anything. It's like he threw a 7-yard pass. It doesn't look like anything, but he didn't hold the ball a half second too long and have to scramble and throw it away. He didn't
That's exactly
miss
it.
the
Yep.
read. He didn't. And that's why it's so hard to measure it with a stat or measure it with whatever, because there's not going to be plays that pop off the tape all the time. There's not going to be, it's just little stuff that is really hard to see sometimes, but he's good at it and he's in the right place for it because, you talk about these defenses playing this, heavy zone coverage, too high shell, making teams dink and dunk down the field. Mac Jones says, all right. He said, a couple months ago, like, you can't go broke taking a profit, and they'll take what they give all day long. And they've got a running game now that can match up with it. They've been over, 120 yards in 7 straight games. So it's quite the,
That's amazing.
offensive team that they've put together around Mac Jones. But the supporting cast is, it's different than other quarterbacks have for sure. And I think it starts with Belichick and McDaniels.
Tyler's perfect world, we would see, and I wouldn't even watch this game if it was the AFC Championship. Tyler would probably want to see Pittsburgh, New England. There won't be a throw over 10. Neither team won't be a throw over 10 yards.
No.
It's going to be
like Air Force the other tonight. They didn't attempt to pass and they scored 49 points.
But that's okay. They don't try to attempt. The problem is Roethlisberger tries to throw the ball down the field and can't. But that's what I can't get over is the difference between those two teams find ways to win with that style, and then you have the Josh Allen, the Herberts, the Mahomes, where it's like off the chart talent, blow your head away quarterback play. But we saw what the Steelers beat the Bills.
They really, I mean, they almost came back and beat Herbert and the Chargers too.
And
that
they
game
almost
was
won that. They had
bonkers.
no business. Don't even
Yeah.
get me started on that game either, because I bet on the chart. But yes, you're right. It's how do they do it? Block punts, intercept. Herbert throws a ball for guys.
It's not by coincidence. I think
It's
there's
not.
a
I agree.
reason
I'm
this stuff
done.
happens.
I'm done fighting it. I'm done fighting.
Okay, I'm glad. All right, though, fellas, I just got a report from the basement that our son needs assistance.
Well,
So I'm gonna have to.
It's understandable.
You
He
know,
can't do a lot on his own just yet. He's
I
knew it was gonna
can't.
be-
You know, he's 4 months old. He can only do so much.
I knew it was going to
But-
be one of us. One of us was going to get the call.
Well, exactly. I know we all have little kids, and here we are
I keep
for an hour.
looking. I keep checking to see if
Yeah.
he's crying yet. I'm like,
But all right, we'll just tease that Trevor Simeon story, and
yeah, we'll
Matt,
do that another time.
we cannot thank Matt enough for coming on here. We miss you, pal. That was awesome.
Matt,
Definitely an all-timer ep because you're on it. Let's do it again soon. I mean, you're welcome anytime. If you want to make time for us, we'll drop everything and hit record. So you just let us know.
we should go to headquarters with Matt when he's in. I think Hamburg. I think
Hell
we
yeah.
gotta go to HBC with Matt and really get this thing going when he gets in town.
Let's
Sign
do
me
it.
up. We'll know a lot more about both teams in a couple of weeks after
That'd be fun.
Patriots play the Titans on Sunday, Bills on Monday Night Football. We'll know what the AFC East looks like and what the AFC looks like a little bit clearer picture here in a few weeks. So always fun to talk ball with you guys, and look forward to seeing you both in person here soon.
Very soon. Thanks so
Definitely,
much,
Matt.
man. And we'll see you guys virtually in person very soon. And thanks everybody for listening.